How's it going? My name is Dale Spinmore. My family and I are the developers of the free Seed to Spoon mobile app that helps you grow food. If you haven't heard about it yet, you can learn more about it at seedtospoon.net. This is a video going to show them, but basically walk you through growing over 60 different vegetables. You can, once the video catches up, I'll show you, but you can tap on a vegetable, read it all about how to grow it. It'll show you the companion plants that grow well next to each vegetable. It'll show you the pests that attack each vegetable. You can tap on that pest to learn about how to treat it with organic methods. For example, if you have aphids, I'm going to tell you to buy ladybugs on Amazon. I'm not going to recommend any pesticides at all because we don't use them in our garden. So this presentation today is about Mediterranean herbs mostly, but mostly just cooking herbs, how to grow them, how to cook with them. We have Bill Farris here with us from Prairie Nursery. I have learned, from all the people I've learned about growing food, he is one that I've learned the most from, specifically about these herbs. He is a gardening wizard, as I like to call him. So go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us who you are, Bill.
Well, Dale said it's Bill Farris from Prairie Nursery. We're a little family-owned operation down on the east side of Norman. We've been down there in one form or fashion or another since 1990. For most of the years, we've been a wholesale grower, but recent years we started transitioning into more of a retail operation because we're a really specialized nursery. We focus on culinary herbs. We grow about 115 to 20 different culinary herbs, and then we do native plant materials. And we wanted to specialize like that in order to reach enough of an audience. You know, we needed to be in the retail side of the business. We also have a website. We're on Facebook. We can do mail order, you know, with the minimum orders. Really raised in southern Oklahoma on a little ranch, and you probably wonder how an old cowboy gets to be an herb grower, because I really like eating good food. And when I got exposed to what herbs could do for food and for cooking, I really got interested in this. And it's we're the kind of folks that grow 14 different kinds of basil instead of just basil. And there's a reason to have 14 different kinds of basil. Good. And I think that's probably what we're going to start off with when we get our talk rolling here is the basils.
And you're right, here we go. So let's go ahead and jump in. Let me start just by talking a little bit about why I care about herbs so much and why I think you should too. And basically it's that when we first started growing food 3 years ago, we had never grown anything, and we really committed ourselves to eating what came out of our garden. Specifically during that season, we really wanted to only eat things that came out of the garden. And after like 2 weeks, zucchini got really boring. And everything else gets really boring when you eat the exact same way every day. And herbs, the first thing that kind of turned me on to them was the idea that we could make things taste different from day to day. So we could have meals, flavor them with different herbs. And then once I started using them and growing with them, I started to learn more about the ways that they can also help your garden. So a lot of things we talk about today are going to be really good companion plants for other plants. And what that means is they're going to help your vegetables that you're trying to grow. And I'll kind of show you how that works with basil. So tomatoes, for example, go really, really well with basil. They've evolved together over thousands of years, millions of years together to benefit each other. And the basil will actually improve the flavor of the tomato. But in addition to that, basil serves a purpose by helping the tomato avoid pests. And the way that it does that is that pests find what they're looking for mostly through smell. So they're flying around trying to smell out a tomato plant, and then they go to it, right? Well, if you have a bunch of basil around that tomato plant, it becomes very difficult for that pest to find it because it's not able to smell it because there's other scents up in the air. So I have a mix of all the herbs we're going to talk about today throughout all my raised beds for mostly that reason, in addition to just the cooking, but to help shield the vegetables from the pests. And then also, many of these herbs just improve the flavor of things too. So I want to kind of quickly talk about why we care about herbs so much. Is there anything you want to add to that about herbs and kind of what led you into this?
Sure. And one of the things, just in general, herbs in general, I like to talk about is, we've got a chef in here today, so I can say this. A lot of people, you watch the TV chefs and read the books, and they make this sound so mysterious and so, like you've got to go to chef school for 2 years and then go to the mountaintop and meditate for a couple of months and then be an herb grower or an herb a chef and use these. Really, it's just take what you like and throw it together. And I like to use this as an example. I don't like to use ready rolled products. I like to keep everything all fresh and natural and homegrown as much as possible. But you know, we're all rushed and we've all got to cut the corners where we can. You can go to the store and get a jar of Prego or ragu and throw your spaghetti in the water, get it hot, and then at the end when you toss it together, just get a handful of fresh basil in there and a handful of fresh parsley or oregano, and it will just transform this into a really good dish instead of that old sugared up sweet, you know, ragu or whatever. It doesn't have to be difficult. We're going to talk about these different types of basil. And one of the things, for instance, you can take a pastrami sandwich or a salami sandwich or whatever and throw a leaf of lettuce leaf basil on there and just transform the sandwich, you know, real easily. So this doesn't have to be difficult, but you've just got to be not afraid to experiment a little bit with these herbs. Rick, go ahead and talk about them.
Yeah, so out of all the herbs we're going to talk about today, most of them are going to be perennial. What that means is they come back year after year. You just have to plant them once. Basil, on the other hand, is an annual. So it grows well from seed, which is a good thing, I think, because they're really easy to get started. You can buy transplants, and Bill has 14 different varieties in his nursery, so it's a really good way to try different ones. But you can just throw seeds directly on the ground. You could probably go ahead and start the seeds now. You'd be pretty safe here in Oklahoma. But by the time they come up, you should be okay. We should be past the threat of the cold weather. Basil does not like cold weather, though, so if the temperatures are below 50, it's going to struggle. For that same reason, you also never want to put it in your fridge. So if you harvest basil and you have too much left over, store it the same way you would a cut flower, just in a vase with water. If it's just going to be for a couple of days, if it's beyond that, you're going to want to preserve it. My favorite way to preserve basil is to run it through a food processor. That'll chop it into a bunch of little pieces. Then you can stuff ice cube trays full of those little pieces, and then fill those with olive oil, and then put those in the freezer. And those are going to freeze into little blocks of olive oil cubes that when you get ready to make your sauce, you can take that and put it on a pan, and it's going to melt, and you're going to have your base that you need for everything else right there ready to go. There's other ways to preserve basil as well, but that's one of my favorites. Basil also, go ahead and talk about some of these varieties of basil that you have and what do you like with those.
Genovese is just your traditional pesto, Italian pesto basil. Sweet is just a milder version of the Genovese. Thai has this licorice anise flavor to it. It's our #3 seller. We sell about equal amounts of Genovese and sweet, with Thai coming in a close third on that. And then all of the others, there's lemon, lime, cinnamon, African blue, Greek columnar, and all of the different basils, holy basil. But then we go into the lettuce leaf is one that I mentioned before that I really like. It's a big, bold, strong growing plant with a great big old crinkly leaf, and you can just replace iceberg lettuce if you use that. Just lay a leaf of this lettuce on there, or the lettuce leaf basil on there in place of it. I found another basil in recent years that I like real well. It's called Dolce Fresca. It's a Genovese type, but it's a little more compact, a little more full than some of the others. One of the things about growing basil, you want to, in all Mediterranean herbs, and I'll mention this several times throughout the talk, all of these need a well-drained garden soil that you're growing in. Now, basil can utilize a little bit more fertility than some of the lavenders or rosemary, oregano, and that, but these are all from the Mediterranean where it's very dry, very poor soils, arid conditions there. Also, if you plant a lot of the basil, you want to make sure that you keep the flowers pinched off so that all of the energy is growing to the leaves and the flavor of it and not going into the seed heads.
Yeah, one other thing I mentioned about basil, you mentioned pesto. If you haven't made pesto yet, I was intimidated by the idea of making pesto for probably a year and a half. We grew basil for a long time, didn't make pesto at all. And then once I learned how easy it was to make it, I felt pretty silly, because literally all you have to do is take a couple handfuls of basil, you throw in some olive oil, some Parmesan cheese, the brick variety, not like the pre-grated stuff, and then some pine nuts or something like that. There's different recipes, but you just throw that in a kitchen, in a blender, a food processor, and then that makes this, pesto. It's really easy to make. It's delicious to have. It's a great alternative to tomato sauce, pasta dishes and things like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it about basil. Are there any questions about basil before we move on to the next? Awesome. So next on the list we have chives. And chives are one of my favorite things to grow. I have them in pretty much, I have them everywhere for a number of reasons. One, we eat them a lot. but also they are a great companion plant. And basically what I do with my raised beds is I surround on the perimeter of my raised beds and on the smart pots that I have out here, those are mine from my house as well. I have a perimeter of onions or garlic or chives. And the idea behind that is I'm trying to protect my vegetables that are in the middle using the same companion planting strategies that I mentioned earlier. So whenever I have that border of onions and chives around, it's harder for insects to find what they're looking for. And the idea is, as they're passing by that raised bed, maybe they're going to pass on to something else because they think it's all onions and they don't want onions. You can throw it, chives, and so chives are a member of the onion family. They're just like the onion plant, except instead of producing a big bulb below, they focus their attention on just growing the leaves up top. And they are perennial, so once you plant them once, you'll always have them. They do great here in Oklahoma. They'll come back year after year, and they'll multiply, and you'll just always have a stand of it. Anything I'm missing on chives I need to talk about?
No, just really simple. You throw it on potatoes, throw it in your egg salad.
Oh, your favorite part of the plant. Let's talk about that.
But and the best part of the plant is the flower. You can use the flower in a number of ways. And ideally, you see the ones that are more open and more mature, you can break those apart and just sprinkle them into a salad. But the prime time is when they're go from that bulb shape like the one there, when they just start to crack open. That's kind of the prime time. They make good snack food when I'm in the greenhouse, but really they're best utilized in a salad, or you can drop them in a soup or something like that. But don't forget to utilize the flowers on the chives plant.
Questions on chives?
I do have a question. You said it makes a good barrier plant.
Yeah.
Does that work against rabbits? Rabbits are always eating all the flowers and everything off of everything.
So here's some stuff you can do for rabbits. I don't know. So I mean, these things aren't going to be 100% effective all the time, right? Especially with, I don't know if rabbits are going to be affected as much, but something that does work on rabbits 100% of the time is a motion-activated sprinkler. You can buy them on Amazon for like $50. You set them up in front of the raised bed. They walk in front of it. It shoots out. Another thing you can do, rabbits cannot jump very tall, so if just a 2-foot fence is all it takes to keep rabbits out. Those are two things you can do for rabbits specifically to help with those. Also, if you have a raised bed that's up off the ground a little bit, it's harder for them to get up into it. Yeah, those are some things we do with rabbits in our yard, or have a dog. That helps.
A dog is a good deterrent. Also, you can use things like blood meal. The scent of blood a lot of times will turn them away. And do you have a fenced-in backyard where your garden is?
Yes, but they've figured out how to get under. Every time we'll put like bricks in front.
I mean, is this like a stockade fence or whatever?
Yeah.
You can go mark your territory.
Yeah, it works, and it'll help your plants. I know we sound crazy right now, but it works.
Same with possums.
Put it to use, right?
Same with possums.
I had a question about garlic.
You know what? A possum is so stupid, I don't know what you can do with them.
Other than shooting,
Yeah.
trapping them.
But, they're again the dog. With possums, they're trap them, get a live trap, carry them off. That's what I'd suggest.
You had a question about garlic, man?
Yeah, I had a question about garlic. So, are you planting that one in spring too?
So garlic likes to go through a bit of a cold snap before you plant it. I'm actually doing an experiment right now where I have garlic that I planted in mid-January directly in the ground. On the same day that I planted that garlic, I took about 20 or 30 cloves and put them in a bag of soil and put that in the freezer. And I left it in the freezer for 3 weeks. I took that out 3 weeks later and I planted those cloves. And I'm experimenting to see how the bulb development is between the two, because I've heard time and time again that if garlic doesn't go through that cold snap, it's not going to develop a big enough bulb. I'm going to find out. Okay. So typically with garlic, you want to plant it in the fall. So you want to plant it around October or so. You want to get it about a month old before we get our really cold killing frost that comes in. And then that garlic's going to go dormant, kind of hang out over the winter, and then in the spring it'll come back and grow really well. And that's how you're supposed to grow garlic. I was just really lazy last fall and didn't get it done. But my garlic that I planted in the spring back in January, I guess that wasn't spring, but it felt like spring that day that I planted it. It looks great above ground right now. So we'll see how the below ground looks compared to the other ones. So yeah, yeah. Next on the list is cilantro. And cilantro is one of my favorite things to eat. I want to ask, who hates cilantro? Does anyone here absolutely hate cilantro? You're genetically predisposed to hate. Does it taste like soap to you?
No.
No, it just...
Maybe,
Well, you may not be. So 20% of the population is genetically predisposed to think garlic tastes like, or not garlic, cilantro tastes like soap. So.
The only thing I can eat is coriander, but that doesn't taste like cilantro at all, so.
Well, so coriander is the seed from the cilantro, but yeah. So cilantro, like I said, does not grow in Oklahoma very well in the summer. And once it gets hot, it bolts, goes to seed, it shoots up that seed stalk, and then forms the coriander seed. If you're going to grow cilantro, you really want to get it going early in the spring. It does not transplant that well either. You want to start it from seed. But the cool thing about his nursery, one of the cool things, is he carries things I've never heard of before. So I found out, like this Puerto Rican cilantro and this Vietnamese cilantro. And these are not actual cilantro plants. Here's the Puerto Rican. Here, the Vietnamese is right here. These are imitation cilantro plants. So they're in different families.
Substitute.
Yeah, substitute. But they taste a lot like cilantro, and they both do really well in the summer. Now, this Vietnamese cilantro can take full sun. It likes water and full sun. The Puerto Rican likes some shade in the afternoon. It's not going to tolerate being out in the sun in the afternoon, especially.
Right. The Vietnamese cilantro is also known as rau ram. Vietnamese typically use it a lot in soup dishes and on fish. It likes a little extra moisture, but it loves the heat and will just go gangbusters right up until we get a hard killing frost. If you want to keep it, it is a perennial, it's just not winter hardy here, so you can grow it in a pot and bring it in. The Puerto Rican cilantro is also known as culantro, and it's kind of native to that Caribbean, wrapping around down to Panama Canal. And it's an understory plant, so when it grows wild out in these places, it's just usually underneath the trees in the shade. So it just needs a little morning sun. It definitely needs to be shaded, but it likes the heat and it likes the humidity. And consequently, both of these are a little slow to get going this time of year because they do not like the cooler weather. So but I think the culantro works really well in like a patio pot, say a 12, 14-inch container, and then it can be brought in for the winter time. It's very potent. It's a member of the thistle family. It's actually an Oregano. You can see the little spines on there. But when you dice it up, you never notice that. And you can use all parts of the plant. But the rau ram, if you smell that, it's got a little bit more of a spicy, peppery, kind of got a little kick to it, whereas the culantro is more of a true cilantro flavor.
And cilantro, obviously, all these you can use in a lot of variety of dishes, any type of Mexican dish, black beans, anything like that. I love to put them also in wraps and salads. The coriander seeds are great to have in that as well. Stir fries. I love them in my salads and my wraps because when you get one, it just adds a little bit of crunch and just a little bit of zest to something. I really like that. Any questions about cilantro?
I'd like to throw a little tidbit of information out here. Most of everybody associates the cilantro with the Mexican food, South American food, and all that. A lot of people think that it's native there, but it's not. Cilantro is also known as Chinese parsley, and that's because when the Spaniards had about exterminated all of the natives down in South America in the silver mines about 400 years ago, they went to China and started importing slave labor from there, and that's how cilantro or Chinese parsley got to South America. And before that they used a couple of plants called papicha and one called papala, both of which we'll have at the nursery are available. They have a similar sort of flavor. It's a little different, but it might be something you might want to play around with.
Any questions over here? Yes, ma'am.
Is this a good companion plant for anything?
Not really as much. Like so the Mediterranean ones are the ones that are the best companion plants because they have those oils in the leaves. And especially when it gets hot, those oils get up in the air. You can smell it just by walking by. The cilantro doesn't do that as much. So it's not going to really protect the plants, but I do so in my beds, I just take a packet of cilantro and I sprinkle it all throughout the bed. And wherever it comes up, great. Because I basically harvest it whenever it gets about this tall. I just harvest that whole plant. A lot of times I only get one harvest off of a plant. But I just have a bunch of it going everywhere. So I always have, cilantro I can harvest kind of throughout. And another thing you want to do, right now you can probably still get away with planting it in full sun. But over the next couple of weeks, I would start also planting rounds on the east side of your house. because then that part of the house come May and June is going to be like 30 degrees colder than full sun. You're going to be able to push cilantro deeper into the year than you typically can. Same applies to kale and spinach and lettuce and all these things that typically bulb. Put them on the east side of your house, and then they'll go a little bit longer. And then as we start to get hot temperatures too, you can help the plant overcome some of those issues. So one thing, I'm going to digress a little bit. The temperature sensor for plants is actually in the roots, and so it's in that part of the plant, up near the base. So if you can trick the plant into thinking it's cooler there, then it won't necessarily bolt as. So come May when we'll be in 80s for a few days, and we'll get that first 100 degree day. On that day, I'll set my irrigation timer to go off about once an hour probably for 5 minutes, just to put some cool water down there and just help that plant kind of get through, baby it through, those really hot days, and that'll extend it deeper into the season.
Does this work well in the container gardens?
Oh yeah, cilantro would do great in containers. I think everything we're talking about today is going to do good in containers, and some of them we're going to recommend in containers. So next on the list is mint, and this is one of our definitely a container plant because mint is very invasive and it'll spread out, and I think it's a good thing. I mean, I like food that grows easy without me having to do anything. Now we don't really eat mint that much. We mostly use mint as flavorings in either teas or one summer drink that I really like to make is I take cucumber and I slice it up, I put that in the freezer. And then basically that becomes my ice cubes for the drink. And then I put that in a water bottle, and I fill it with water. I squeeze some lemon, I put in a handful of this, shake it up, let that sit for a few hours. It's a really nice, refreshing drink. In the summer, the Kentucky Kernel variety is the right variety for mint juleps. So if you like mint juleps, that's what you need to get for it. Bill, you want to talk about mint?
No, other than the fact that you can, it makes the lawn smell really good when you're mowing the lawn. Once you let it get away from you, then you get it makes it smell good. But mint is something that will benefit from a little shade too. You want to not plant it where it's going to be in a hot afternoon sun. We do a number of different varieties, also the mojito mint, chocolate mint, candy mint, blue balsam mint, orange mint, lime mint, apple mint, pineapple mint. And all of these have various applications, but they all just smell good. But you can plant them in the ground if you take we don't have a big nursery container, but say this was a 2-gallon pot or something like that of mint, you can plant that into the soil and leave it sticking out of the soil this far so that the runners don't get down and start underground. Now you'll have to make sure that you don't let them touch the ground and take off. Keep it trimmed up around that, but that keeps you from having to maintain a pot. The roots, the runners won't get deep enough to come out the bottom of the pot, but the feeder roots will. So it's like it's growing in the ground. So a little trick to get it to grow easier for you.
Oh, another thing you can mint for is homemade toothpaste and things like that. It's pretty cool.
Breath mints.
Yep. Literally grab a handful of mint and chew on it. And that's the breath. Any questions on mint? So next on the list we have oregano, and out of all the things we're going to talk about today, I think oregano is probably the one that has the most health benefits. Not only to humans, but also to dogs. So you can throw some oregano in dog food. It helps them out quite a bit. The 3 varieties of oregano that I stick to are Greek, Italian, and hot and spicy. Greek is the original oregano that's kind of the strong oregano flavor that you're probably used to using with like pizza flavorings, things like that. This Italian oregano is a cross between Greek and sweet marjoram, so it's a little more mild. And then hot and spicy is legit hot and spicy. He told me that, and I didn't believe him. And I grabbed a handful, and I ate it, and I regretted it. But it's great to throw a handful in some black beans. I really like using it in that, or in any dish that you just kind of want to spice up a little bit. It's really good for that. It's also a perennial, so it's going to come back year after year. Oregano is very easy to grow. It's very hard to kill. So it's a great plant for beginners to start out with. It's not too invasive. It will, kind of spread out, but not so much so that you can't control it. It's really easy to dehydrate, to harvest. It's a very versatile plant that can be used on pretty much anything. If you're only going to choose one thing to grow today out of what we talk about, I would go with oregano. What am I missing on oregano?
Oregano makes a good ground cover too for other purposes, but you also want to cut back the flowers when it tries to go to flower, because you'll lose a lot of the flavor from it. You're not going to hurt it. Take a weed eater to it. Just get after it. Depending on how big of an area you've got to deal with. But what you'll see a lot of times if you buy the canes or the McCormick's in the little glass jars at the grocery store, it'll say on there Mexican oregano. And those are the plants that are flavored like oreganos, but they're not true oreganos. One is called Oleomentha, and the other one is Libia graveolens, and they're native to further south, Central America, Mexico, and down in there, maybe some of the southern part of the United States. And there's nothing wrong with those. We do grow the Libia. The Oleomentha is a little bit it's more of an ornamental, really. For a home gardener, they're real small plants in stature. They can be a little bit of a challenge to grow if you don't have really good, well-drained soil. But we do carry the Libia graveolens, and it makes a nice house plant or a patio pot plant, and you can utilize those in any dish that you use regular oregano in. But it's interesting to me that they use those plants as substitutes instead of the original real oregano. I don't know if they hold the flavor better in captivity in the jar or not.
This is probably a good time to mention too that one thing I was really blown away by when I first started growing food was the difference in quality between store-bought herbs and then stuff that you grow yourself. So much so that I can't even really use the other stuff now. It just seems like it's like paper. It just doesn't have flavor compared to this stuff. So, and one of the reasons is the freshness. These herbs lose their volatility and their oils and all of that over time. So the fresher that you can eat it, the better of an experience you're going to have with it, and the more medicinal properties you're going to get from it. Basically, when you're eating that stuff out of the store, you may be getting something that tastes like oregano, but you're not getting the health benefits of it. And that's the whole purpose of oregano for me, is really the health benefits you get from it. So if you're getting the imitation stuff, you're not getting any of that. You might as well.
And a lot of that jar container stuff that's in may be grown in another country overseas, in which case, if it's brought into the United States, it gets fumigated.
Yeah.
You said it grows year after year, so do you need to bring it inside, or can you leave it?
No, oregano will thrive. It'll be fine. Every oregano that I have has overwintered and hasn't died off. Now, so like some of the other things we talk about, like rosemary is kind of iffy. Sometimes it survives, sometimes it doesn't. Oregano is bulletproof, and it'll come right back. The only exception to that is if you had it in a container maybe, it was outside, they got frozen too much, but if it's in the ground, it's going to do fine, especially here in Oklahoma. All these varieties are great. Any other questions on oregano? Yes, ma'am?
Do they have any bug deterring qualities?
Most of the things we're talking about here, bug deterring qualities, yes. Yes, oregano is another great companion plant. Oregano also improves the flavor of a lot of vegetables. I don't have the list with me, but so many things it improves the flavor for, and it repels too. And none of these things we're talking about really have any pest issues. I guess the parsley could get some caterpillars on it, but other than that, sage, I think you can see some stuff on, but you're not really going to see any pest issues on these at all. So next on the list we have parsley, and I'm going to let you talk about parsley on this.
Okay. Well, now that you've kind of veered into that, parsley and dill and fennel are the same family, and they're hosts for the swallowtail butterfly caterpillars. And my advice is to buy some for them. And when that's what we do at the nursery when they come. We roll the sides of our greenhouses up when the weather allows us, permits us to, let nature come in. So we get on our fennel and our parsley, we get these swallowtail caterpillars, and they'll eat the whole crop. So what we do is go through the greenhouse and we just dedicate a flat to them, and we pick all the caterpillars off and put them on one flat and let them have their meal, and so that they can go on and that's kind of the way we approach the pollinator caterpillar and pollinator and caterpillar issues in the greenhouse. So basically, there's three types of parsley. There's the curly, which is generally considered a garnish. You can eat it; it's got a good flavor to it. But if you're just eating it raw, it's kind of got a tickly tendency to it. Most of the chefs will talk about or recommend the Italian flat leaf, and there's a lot of different types of Italian flat leaf. The one we grow is called the Italian Giant, and it's just a great big honking parsley, great big flat leaf, got a very good flavor. One of the things to be aware of with parsley is it has a lot of oxalic acid in it. Some people can tend to be a little bit sensitive to that and give you a little tummy issues, but just think about that when typically we don't use that much parsley in anything for it to be a problem. The other one that I don't see people use, we grow it, we don't sell a lot of it because people aren't aware of it or don't know what to do with it, is the root parsleys. And the root parsley's grow just a little white carrot, tuberous roots, about 4 or 5 inches long. It looks like a white carrot. You can still utilize the top of the root parsley, same as you would any other parsley. But the root part, the carrot, you just dice that up and put it in these soups or stews, anything that you want a little parsley flavor in. It's a very nutritious vegetable. Easy to grow. Parsley needs a little afternoon shade here in Oklahoma. Don't grow it in the full hot afternoon sun.
And you can grow from seed as well. It's one of the other ones that actually does grow from seed. Most of the things we talk about today do not grow from seed, but this is one we can.
One of the things I might throw in here just as an ad lib is, most of the writers and articles that a lot of them you see, we have our Oklahoma Gardening magazine now, and a few that's locally, but most of this national stuff, these writers are on the East Coast or up north or whatever, and they say full sun. And as one of my cohorts said one day, full sun in Oklahoma only means to 1 o'clock.
Yeah, I learned that the hard way. The Square Foot gardening book was the first book that I bought when I started gardening, and I still subscribe to probably 80% of the stuff it talks about. But when it says full sun for tomatoes and prune down to a single stem, that does not work here in Oklahoma. It will fry them right up. So you got to remember that as you're reading gardening books and stuff, that if it's not written in Oklahoma, you got to take that with a grain of salt, that they haven't grown here.
Yeah,
so.
a good 6 hours of Oklahoma sun is enough for anything.
Yeah.
Me too.
So out of everything we're talking about today, I think rosemary is probably my favorite thing. Bill actually does the trials for OSU for rosemary to find out which rosemary varieties do best here. So I'm going to let you talk about what your trials are showing us through that.
We're trialing 6 different cultivars of rosemary, 5 plants of each in our beds. And what we found, and this is what's most of your articles and authors will say, is ARP is the hardiest, and we found that to be true. It is absolutely the most cold hardy. That does not mean that it's 100%. Here in Oklahoma, the problem with rosemary is it's close enough to that borderline. When we have these warm days in the winter of 16-17, in our 30 plant trial, we lost 28 of them because it went from 68. Within a week, we were down into 4 degrees. The next week, we were back up into the 60s, and the next week it went down to 4, and then 4 below, and then a week later we were back up in the 60s. And it's not that it got down to 4 to 0 that killed the plants, it's the fact that we were going up and down and up and down. At 60 degrees, these Mediterranean plants are wanting to grow. They think it's springtime, so they're ready to take off, and they get whacked with single-digit temperature, and that's what kills them. So this year, we replanted everything identically. We've lost 2 or 3 plants, but not nearly like we did last year, because we did have kind of a gradual cool down, even though we had single-digit temperatures back there in January, I believe it was. We've had a lot better success this year. But definitely, ARP is the hardiest of all of them. In my estimation, it's not the most attractive landscape plant, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. ARP is very high in volatile oil, so it's a very strong flavored in the springtime. When it's growing and really lush, you can bite it, it'll almost water your eyes. That's how strong it is. The Inferno is one of my favorites. It's a milder flavored. It's a better, from an aesthetic landscape point of view. Barbecue is one that it's not in the trial because we know it's not hardy here. It's a very attractive, real glossy green, compact. Makes a real nice patio pot. Has long, straight stems that you can use for barbecue skewers. And there's others that you can do that with any of them, but they particularly like the barbecue. We grow one that's called Garizia, after the village in Italy. And it's a big, bold plant with almost columnar type growth habit. It has a big, fat, long leaf, and it has a real spicy floral flavor to it. So not all of the varieties taste the same. There's a lot of variations, and the only way to figure out what you like is to try them and taste test them and see what the stronger ones versus the more florally spicy ones.
The first time I went to his nursery, I spent probably 3 hours there just taste testing all the different things he has. So I definitely recommend doing that at some point. I want to go ahead and pass this around and talk briefly about the skewer thing. I think it's a really cool idea. You can take, so this is a rosemary branch. We just took the leaves off like that, and you're left with the skewer.
If you have, your plants, if you've got them in the ground, they're going to get way bigger and longer than that one is. You can get skewers this long.
And then what you can do is soak this in water for about 30 minutes, and then take an ice pick or something that's sharp. You can point through the vegetable or the meat, whatever it is you're trying to skewer, and you can thread this through, and you can use this as your skewer in the barbecue. And I'm going to pass this around. If you take your finger and just kind of scratch on here, you'll see how overwhelming that scent is. It infuses that flavor directly into the vegetables and the meat that you're cooking with. It's a really cool way to use these. Now, I do want to say, if you're going to be buying a rosemary plant and you want to do stuff like this, it is worth it to go ahead and buy one that's older, because they don't necessarily grow super fast in the beginning. They'll start growing faster once they're older and more established, but those first couple of years, you're not going to be able to get very many of those. So, for $25, you can buy a 3 or 4 year old, and those big ones you have up there, how old are those? At least that old, right?
Yes.
Yeah, they're at least that old, and I got one from him last year, and it took off. It was huge, and I had more than enough rosemary. But the first couple of years that I tried growing rosemary, I would go and I would get those small rosemary plants. I would get frustrated because I wouldn't be able to use as much off of it as I wanted to. So, with a lot of these herbs, the woody herbs in particular, the sage, the rosemary, the thyme, they can take a while to get to that really big size. So it's worth it to buy a plant that's a little bit older. Any questions about rosemary before we move on? Awesome. We got a couple others on the list here. Sage. Sage is something that I mostly only cook with sausage and with making turkey dressing. I think most people are the same way, but I do like to have sage in the garden because it's a great companion plant, and the flowers that come off of it are pretty cool also. Just a brief story here. So last year we were going on a trip to Florida, and I had 4 kids, and 2 of them are young enough that they scream at me a lot because they're under 2. And not always for a reason. They just kind of randomly scream at me. And I knew they were going to be doing that a lot while we're in the car. So I actually harvested a bunch of our sage flowers, put them in a brown paper bag, because I knew that when they were screaming at me, I needed something to just de-stress. So I just take that bag and kind of huff the sage flowers. Literally, I do that. But it works. And it's a really nice smell. So yeah. But that's one way to show that a lot of these herbs have other qualities other than, as you start growing these and you spend time with them out in your garden, you're going to find that you like using them other things. You like the smell of them. Rosemary, I literally bear hug it sometimes just to get that scent on me. It's my cologne sometimes. So my wife will be like, "What are you wearing?" I'm like, "Arb today." Yesterday was Fernot, today's Arb. It's like.
You're probably thinking, Arb, what kind of a name is that? It was actually named for a little community down in East Texas called Arb, Texas.
So, Bill, you want to talk about some of these varieties of sage and what we like about them?
Yeah, you didn't try smoking the sage on the cook, did you?
No, I didn't. But I think if we had any ghost issues, I had it on board for that, so we could do that whole thing.
We grow a number of different varieties, and some of the sages that we do are primarily ornamental. They're the ones that are like the golden variegated nectarine, the purple sage, the tricolor sage. But we've got one that we call blue silver, which is a hybrid sage that I got from a grower back on the East Coast a long time ago. And it is just a phenomenal plant, both in size. I mean, it gets this tall. And when it blooms in the springtime, and you've never seen a plant that attracts honeybees like this plant does to the flowers. Because these plants are from the Mediterranean. Honeybees are European. They were brought over by the early settlers, and so they're attracted to all these Mediterranean herb flowers. A tremendous pollinator plant, but it has a big, huge leaf on it, and it's very strongly flavored and very strongly scented. And I really like it. We've got a row of it there in our trial gardens, and the plants are literally this tall. Your regular garden gray sage, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just a milder version of the blue silver. The ornamental sages they're more like the garden sage. They still have the same sage flavor, so you can use them as well and just add some color to your herb garden. Now the pineapple sage is not hardy usually. Sometimes in mild winters it will survive. But if you haven't been around pineapple sage, you never smelled anything that smells as good as this pine. It really smells like pineapples. And you can use the leaves in teas and that sort of thing. The flowers are edible, and it also flowers in the late summer and fall when the hummingbirds are migrating back through, and the hummingbirds absolutely love this red flower. So if you're in hummingbirds, you've got to have some pineapple sage. But again, with all of these, good well-drained soil, raised beds, berms, that sort of thing, so they don't get overwatered.
Any questions about sage? All right, we got 2 more on our list, and then when we're done with this, we're going to go through and show you how we can propagate herbs, so how you can take one plant, make new plants from it, and then everybody's going to be able to do that. In the back, we'll have stations set up where you can go back there and choose from either oregano, rosemary, or basil, I think is what we have right now. So go through, and we'll do that here in a minute. We have 2 more herbs we'll talk about before we do that. The next one on our list is tarragon, and tarragon is not something I'd even heard of until I met Bill. And he actually has a variety, the Texas tarragon, which is not, again, it's one of those substitute or imitation plants. It's not a true tarragon, but it does really well in our climate here. And one thing I want to mention, I'll let him talk about that in a second, but I do want to mention a way that you can use tarragon that's pretty interesting, is you can make your own vinaigrette. So you can take white wine vinegar, and then you can take tarragon, put it in that vinegar, let it sit for 2 or 3 weeks, and then strain that out, and you've got a really nice vinaigrette that you can use in salads and stuff. So you're going to talk about some of these other varieties of tarragon that you have and what you like to know.
Sure. If you're ever tempted or see the opportunity to buy tarragon seed, don't. Because it's Russian tarragon, it has absolutely no flavor. It's worthless sense. So you want to stick with true French tarragon. True French tarragon does not produce flowers, therefore it does not produce seeds. So you have to do it from cuttings and or divisions. And the good part about that is you maintain the genetic integrity, so the flavor is always good and strong. The French tarragon here in Oklahoma is another one of those that needs a little shade in the afternoon. It needs a good well-drained soil. A raised bed works really good for it. And you can either plant it on the east side of a structure, a house, or whatever, or you can plant something like rosemary or lavender that's going to get tall and plant the tarragon on the east side of it where it gets shaded afternoon, and that'll work real well for you, especially in a raised bed. If you don't have success, if you don't have the soil for it or whatever, don't want to go to the trouble with the French tarragon, the Texas tarragon or Mexican mint marigold, it's a plant that's in the marigold family, Tagetes lucida, has that same licorice anise flavor to it. It will produce little marigold yellow flowers late in the fall, but it loves the heat. Tolerates the weather here, and it's not a hardy perennial, so you'll lose it if it's outside, during the winter. But you can replant it in the springtime. It's prolific. It'll produce plenty of leaves for you to use in your cooking or your salads or whatever you want to do.
Any questions about tarragon? So we're on our last one, which is thyme, and I'm going to do a terrible pun. I'm actually out of time. I've got to run over to the other building. I'm doing a presentation in about 15 minutes that talks about everything we've learned through building our garden, basically my advice to anyone that wants to start gardening, everything we've learned for the past 3 years. So I'm going to run over and do that. Bill's going to handle the rest of this part, and then we'll do the propagation part. So
we'll have a good time.
Is that our last time, Kyle? Or do you have any more?
No, it's not. I'm going to tell a story here.
Okay.
Back when we were first getting this thing started, wanted to grow herbs, trying to think of a name for the business. I was going to call it Bill's Herb House, the best little herb house in Oklahoma. And my tagline was going to say, for a good time, THYME. But my wife wouldn't go for that, so here we are.
I got to take that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh, well, everyone get it's French, and what were the other one?
That's all right. We'll talk about it.
Okay.
We grow a number of different times, and a lot of them are purely for ornamental purposes. They make good ground covers, and they, in small gardens and or pots, like strawberry pots, they trail out and that sort of thing. So they're really good for that. But the good cultivars for culinary purposes, the ones that I like, and then again, we're talking about vegetatively produced plants for cuttings. I tried growing thyme from seed for a long time, and you just don't wind up with a vigorous plant that make it here in Oklahoma. So that's why we've gone through, chosen these particular cultivars, we've grown them here, and that we know that they will do well. My favorite is one called Dockwell's. Don't know really much about the origin on it. It was found at an old homestead back east many number of years ago, but it seems to hold up to our climate issues here that we have, the extremes. We get into the monsoons and then go into a drought, and then it's cold and then it's hot. It seems to tolerate that a lot better than the other varieties. It has a really good, just traditional thyme flavor to second to that, I like French thyme. It's just a lot of the same characteristics. It's just not probably my second choice to the Dot Wells. But we do a number of other thymes like the orange thyme, tangerine thyme, lemon thyme, one called Dune Valley that has a citrus flavor to it. So there's a lot of those little nuances of flavor that you can get out of thyme. And I'm going to do a pop quiz here. We've got a chef in the house. What dishes do you like to use thyme in?
Potatoes usually.
Potatoes?
Potatoes, carrots. Yeah.
I really like thyme on fish. You can absolutely transform a tuna salad sandwich with thyme sprinkled on top. You wouldn't believe what a difference it makes. Now, I love tuna salad sandwiches, but I also love it more with thyme on it. Those are really good. And you can add them to soups or stews and any of that sort of things as well. But any questions about the thyme? Good deal. Well, that ends the Power program. We're just going to do a little quick demonstration here and show you all how to do cuttings. And if y'all want to, well, there's probably too many of you to gather around here. I'll try to just open this up where you can see what we're doing. But basically, you take a pot, any kind of a pot like this, fill it with a good potting soil. If you've got a plant, whether it's oregano or whether it's sage like this, you want to take a cutting about that size, strip those bottom leaves off of it, and it's probably best if you go, most everywhere these days that has a garden center, whether it's Lowe's or Home Depot or Walmart or whatever, have these little jars of rooting hormone in it. Most of the time they're powdered. We use a commercial version of it that we mix with water because it's just more efficient for us. But you'll want to wet the stem here in some water and then dip it in that rooting hormone, and then basically all you have to do is dibble a little hole in the middle of your pot and stick it in like that. At that point, what you want to do is go ahead and have your soil moistened beforehand. You don't want it saturated, but moisten it. And then just take a squirt bottle with pure water in it and squirt that cutting really good so that it's got some moisture on the leaves, because you just cut its feeding system off. So it needs some moisture. It doesn't necessarily need fertility at this point, but it does need some moisture there. And then from that point, you can take any sort of glass dish, Tupperware, Rubbermaid, kitchen bowl, or whatever that it'll fit down into, and then take any kind of plastic. What I use a lot of times is the vegetable produce bags from the grocery store, or anything that's translucent that'll let light in there, and cover that dish or that container that you've got this pot sitting in, and you've created a little mini greenhouse there. So that keeps the moisture from escaping. Otherwise, you're going to have to just mist this thing all the time, all day long. But this way, you can get by with misting probably in the wintertime, and this time of the weather once a day. But if you did it morning and night, just take your squirt bottle and give it a little squirt and put that plastic back over. In 3 or 4 weeks, you'll be able to, what you'll want to do is you want to just tug on. Now, don't mess with it for at least a couple of weeks until you get, but when you can feel a little resistance there, you know that it's got some roots started out on it. And then from that point, you can kind of start weaning it out of the greenhouse, leave the top off of it, but still maybe mist it once or twice a day until you're, and at some point you'll be able to see, bump it out of the pot, or you'll see roots coming out of the little holes in the bottom down here. And at that point, you can either go to a larger container, or if the weather's appropriate, you can take it outside and put it in the ground. But if y'all want to do some of this, we can move right on here to the back, and we'll pot up a few, and everybody can take one home. We've got a little 10% discount. Everybody grab one of these on the way out. And, all right, let's start. We've got basil, we've got oregano, we've got lemon balm, we've got Vietnamese cilantro, and rosemary.